Hi, everyone. Welcome to our final session in our conference on a well-being economy for Alberta, which will take the form of a smaller group dialogue. So in a few minutes, we will be distributed into breakout rooms, each of which will have a discussion facilitator as well as a note taker. But before that, I'm delighted to introduce David Swann, who will set the stage for those dialogues. So as many of you will know, David is a Canadian medical doctor and politician. He was the leader of the Alberta Liberal Party and leader of the opposition in the Alberta Legislature from December 2008 until resigning as party leader in September of 2011. He returned as interim leader of the Alberta Liberal Party on February 1st of 2015 and led the party through the 2015 provincial election. And I can hardly think of a better person to set the stage for our final session. So over to you, David, and looking forward to your comments with thanks.
Thank you, Lindsay. Well, it's been such a good day and a half with you folks. I've learned so much and been so encouraged by the many examples around the world, really, of thinking out of the box and trying new approaches to what has been a very standard economic approach based on a very, as has been indicated, a capitalist model that is, some have said, the free market, which is anything but free. When, as a politician, I saw how much lobbying was done by those with money, how much influence those with powerful positions and economic interests were able to get access to the reins of power and influence the decision making. I was at the provincial level, but I know that the same happens at municipal and federal levels in varying degrees. The examples that some of you have presented have been surprising to me, that you've been able to make such progress in some very important areas that are dear to my heart, issues of inclusion, housing, environmental protection, thinking about the longer term impacts of what we're doing locally and regionally and nationally, and as basic as housing and clean water. These are so fundamental to who we are as human beings and communities. And I was particularly encouraged hearing some of the comments about the role of community in this and the role of, well, non-government organizations as well as individuals in promoting ideas and actions outside the box. As a public health physician for 30 years and a 15-year politician at the provincial level, I have been sorely frustrated by the lack of foresight, the ignorance around prevention and the importance of prevention in such a so-called educated society, the inadequate resources provided to people at risk, especially single mothers, and the cycle of poverty and dysfunction that results in so much demand on our social services and the healthcare system, much of which is preventable. So I'm particularly encouraged by this conference, and I so applaud the Parkland and particularly Lindsay McLaren in her initiative on this. To highlight my experience in the healthcare system, I left clinical practice after 10 years as I saw no evidence of prevention. Many conditions, whether they were illnesses or injuries, eminently preventable. And when I looked in politics at the budget in Alberta, for example, 95% of our budget is for people who are injured and sick. 5% of the budget is invested in prevention, early intervention. And that includes issues like housing, income, and obviously the social determinants of health, which are outside the health budget, but should be eminently influenceable by professionals involved in the healthcare system who can see the connections between poverty and mental illness and physical illness and injury. So the other just comment I'd make before we split into some discussion groups is I was very disappointed in the lack of public engagement in the political process. There was a sense in this province that you have to be somebody special to go and meet a politician or try to influence political decision making. You have to pluck up a lot of courage. You have to organize yourself so well. And there was a real, I think, reluctance to confront the political issues, the policy issues of the day, that I think is based on fear to some extent, but also cynicism. So we have much to overcome to try to give people a positive attitude about politics, which is truly just negotiation around what we value and what we want to see prioritized in the public sector. I was also happy to see the comment about citizen assemblies as a vehicle for getting more of these issues on the public agenda. Every political party I know talks about the public interest. What they do actually when they get in is focus on the private interests and not the long term, but the short term. So for me, one of the fundamental issues that people need to understand in the non-government sectors is that political parties and political actors are fundamentally focused on the private and the short-term interests, not only because that focuses attention on their re-election, but also because that seems to be where at least their interpretation of the public interest is, because there is so much silence from the public on what their priorities actually are. So the establishment of a citizens' assembly would be a wonderful innovation here in Alberta. I dare say having a citizen assembly nationally would also be a tremendous contribution to some of these discussions. But I'll open it now to the smaller group discussions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. So welcome back, everyone. So we're about to bring the conference to a close. And so I'm just going to first of all invite David Swann to give a few final comments from the breakout room, and then we will transition into hearing from Jason Foster, the director of the Parkland Institute. So thanks so much. Over to you, David.
Well, Lindsay, thank you so much for helping host and initiate this important conference, one that opened my eyes to some possibilities that I hadn't considered even after 15 years in politics. And I think that illustrates the reality that politicians in general, as I experienced them in Alberta and the provincial legislature, are given to understand that this is the way it is and nothing changes in fundamental ways except the players around the table. We have been given an economy, an economic structure that was passed along to us and influenced greatly by governments that were influenced and continue to be influenced by the corporate sector, by the business minds that saw the way to exploit and develop and create profit. And we have choices to make about whether that is the best approach to a healthy society, a sustainable environment, and the long-term well-being of the planet. Clearly, it has created serious problems for all of us, not least the climate crisis that we're in. And we have the opportunity, especially in Canada, but elsewhere in the free world, through our democracy, to change the priorities that we give to our politicians and to our governance and the policies that emerge from our governments. So I guess I I was struck by and reminded by the close connection between being in a democracy with the freedoms that we have to speak, to vote, to influence public policy, but we remain passive. I'm thinking mostly of our Canadian culture, and somehow either believe that we cannot influence the public process, we cannot influence public policy in the rather dramatic ways that we've heard exemplified in Wales and New Zealand and elsewhere, that have put people and the planet first and focused our energies and our public funding particularly around protecting people and fair labor practices and a protected environment. Those have to be now, as a priority, shifted. And I want to emphasize, I guess, that my 15 years in politics exposed me to how little people feel they can influence and how little participation there really is apart from voting in our democratic system. And I guess if I had one recommendation as to how we might proceed with making the kinds of changes that many of these exciting examples around the world are showing us, it would be that we re-examine how we teach democratic process and democratic engagement, and we model democratic process and democratic engagement, because it's clear to me that in my own community and in my own family, there is a dearth of confidence, a lack of engagement in thinking and speaking about the issues of the day as if we make a difference. There's a lack of trust in the political process, and that's again in part because political parties, corporations have dominated the decision making and the policies that continue to create threats for not only the environment, but for well-being of people and jobs and work in the future. So this was an exciting, really inspiring conference to me to see examples of how a well-being economy can serve so many of the true values that most people share, and put a value, for example, on women in the work that they do at home and the child rearing that is so critical to our future and is undervalued continually. Those are just examples of how we need to, by dint of political engagement, citizens engaging in the political process, organizing themselves so that they have confidence to confront the policies and the people making decisions, and persist over time in seeing our economic, social, and environmental priorities change for the better. Those are the comments I would make with a challenge to the politicians as well as the citizens to be open to the possibility that the free market economy is not the only option on the table, that we have choices and we have to engage with the political process in order to shift those processes away from short-term private interests to long-term public interests. And the way to get people to engage is to engage with people, as one of our participants said earlier. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David, for those comments. That's just a really helpful way to sum up the excellent discussions that we had, especially in our little group. And I really look forward to reading the notes from the other groups. And thanks so much to those who facilitated and took notes in those other groups. So now we will turn it over to Jason Foster, who is the director of the Parkland Institute, as well as an associate professor of human resources and labor relations at Athabasca University. And Jason, I just want to thank you so much for closing our conference today, and really look forward to your closing comments. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Lindsay, and thank you, David. I'm not going to talk long because I think we've heard from people who are way smarter around this stuff than I am. I think I'll just say that, you know, I found today and last night to be a remarkably heartening and hope-building event. Too often in Alberta politics, especially in the last few weeks, in the aftermath of the election, it's been conversations about Alberta politics have a bit of a dark tone to them. And I like to think that this conference was very much, I think, an antidote to some of those darker thoughts that many of us have been having in recent weeks. This leaves me with the number of possibilities and options and directions that we can go as Albertans and as Canadians to be able to put well-being at the center of our decision-making processes. We're really came to the fore in the last today and last night. And so I think Parkland, we don't see this conversation and this conference as being kind of a one-time event. We really very much want to kind of keep working on this as an institute, because we think this has the potential. We're saying, someone said in our small group that there is something subversive about the notion of well-being. It's something that we can get a broad number of Albertans to be able to sign on to the idea of well-being and focusing around well-being, but that what comes out of when we do that is transformative in terms of what it can do to our politics and our economics. And because it has that ability to transform our politics, that's why it's something that Parkland wants to be engaged in. And so for those of you who this might be your first Parkland event, we'd encourage you to sign up to our email list, because hopefully you will see more of this kind of discussion, more of these kinds of discussions about how do we further a wellness agenda in Alberta and across Canada. So hopefully there will be other things. I think I'll leave it there. The last thing I want to do is I want to offer up a few thank yous. Obviously, I want to thank the co-sponsors of this event, which is the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives National Office, the Parkland Institute, of course, and the Social Sciences Humanities Research Council of Canada, who, because of their grant we were able to achieve, you were able to do this event for you free of charge. I want to thank all of our speakers and the respondents and the panelists that spoke over the last night and today. I want to thank the facilitators from the sessions and of course our note takers who often go unnoted, and in particular our graphic and visual note taker. Thank you so much, Tara. And I want to thank Lindsay McLaren in particular. She has been the motor for this. She has been the creation of the momentum. She has worked doggedly for a long time to try and make this happen and moving this area of work forward. So she deserves a ton of credit and thank you for all of her work. And as well, I want to thank the steering committee that worked on building this conference for us. Mark Danielski, Bob Aska, Gwendolyn Blue, Stan Houston, David Swann, and of course I can't, and of course Lindsay was on that committee, of course, and I cannot forget the hardworking staff of Parkland Institute. That would be Rebecca McGrath-Gray, Ricardo Acuna, and we can't forget Charlene and Rita as well. All chipped in to try and make this happen in a very short period of time. When we got the grant, we only got the grant a couple months ago, so this all happened very, very quickly. And a final thank you to some of our technical people who work behind the scenes. Rob Butts for his work on the website. We had AV and technical support from Angus Findley from Findley Productions, and Chris Yip from Hub Audio Visual. So all as these things happen, they seem seamless from the front, but it requires the many hands in the background to be able to make these things happen. So thank you to everyone. And now finally, thank you to all of you who have spent the day with us talking about this, imagining what we can do to be able to make put wellness at the center of our political discussions and economic considerations. And with that, I guess I will close off the conference. Have a good rest of your week.